Hello, everybody. My name is Kyle Patterson. I am the Director of Culture and Business Development here with Bryson Insurance. With me is Rory Sheehan of Positive Strategies, a learning business that does training and development in neuro-linguistic processing, programming. But is just an incredible facilitator, has been doing it for many years. And I can even remember from many years ago being in workshops with Rory, and I still utilize what he had shared then. I even have a book from your son.
Oh, really?
On his lemonade business or his freezy business.
Yes.
And I still have that book and I still look at it. So Rory's been around for a long time, but he's never actually lost his way of being. He's still super effective. And so today we're going to be talking about how kids learn. And why does Bryson put on webinars like this? Like, why would an insurance company put on this type of webinar? It's because we just care about our clients and what they're up to. We care about your success as parents and just in general. We love to bring value beyond just the insurance experience. We love to learn ourselves and we love to share that with you. And we love introducing you to great people like Rory.
Thanks.
So I've introduced Rory in brief here, but he's actually been doing this since 1990, and he is an NLP practitioner masterclass. And maybe you can just speak briefly to that after. Like, what is NLP, if that makes sense too?
Sure.
But he's really well known here locally in Whitby and Durham region and has been a Reader's Choice Award winner for 5 years. Mm-hmm. So just real quick, what is neuro-linguistic programming or programming?
I guess the best way to describe it is it's a form of communication, and one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight as far as education goes is that it's really about communicating. So how the parents communicate with the kids, how the teachers communicate with the kids, and more importantly, how the kids communicate with themselves. So neuro-linguistic programming looks at interpersonal communication as well as how you're communicating with yourself.
Okay, beautiful. And usually at this point, I put up an agenda of what we're going to speak about today, but Rory was really specific with me to ask me to sort of be his test subject as we go through this. Yes. And so I did not spend a lot of time actually going through his slides, instead making myself available to being his test subject as we go.
Yes.
So here you go. And again, I just want to remind everybody, please ask questions as we go. It would really help sort of broaden the conversation, and it also helps to make sure we're landing the content.
Sure, and we can customize it to a certain extent if there's some specific questions. So in a general sense, what we're going to look at this evening is how we learn, and we're going to come from the perspective that learning is a form of communication. So the challenge is that as adults, we've all been told that we have to learn something. So, you have to learn your math tables, you have to learn the alphabet. They tell you how to learn, they tell you what to learn, but very rarely do we be taught how to learn. So what we're going to talk about tonight is how our mind works when it comes to learning. And ideally, we're going to go through a couple of examples and do some exercises so that everybody has something they can use right away, whether it's with family members, adults, or kids, or even at work tomorrow.
Okay, beautiful.
So that's where we're headed.
And I just want to make sure too, Martha asked if everything is set up and working on our end. You cannot hear or see us. It's all the way it's supposed to be. So we're just taking a quick pause to see. I don't know. Okay, so thank you, Amy, for chiming in there. So Martha's going to exit and come on back in, and so we shall keep on going. So thank you, Amy, and let's go into the myths about learning.
Okay, so I'm going to get the most controversial part out of the way right at the beginning. So here's the thing, and this is my belief. There's no such thing as learning disabilities. I think it's really unfair to categorize kids as having a disability. What I've experienced is that they just learn differently. So when we tell a child that they have a learning disability, they're generally going to bring their performance down so that it's congruent with that learning disability. So let me give you something to think about, and you and I can talk about this, and maybe from your experiences too. But let's say you're communicating with a coworker at work, and there's a misunderstanding. Is it fair to say that each of you should accept about 50% of responsibility for that misunderstanding? Is that fair?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Okay, well,
yeah,
let's see. I'll show you where I'm going with this.
yeah, okay.
So now if there's people that are at the same level, I think it's reasonable to say if there's a misunderstanding that they should each accept close to half the responsibility for that misunderstanding. If you're working with a subordinate, and you're communicating with a subordinate, I think it's fair to say that you, as the senior employee, should accept a higher level of responsibility. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say, I'm responsible for what I'm communicating or how it's being
Right.
communicated or even how I'm hearing it. So yeah,
Right.
it would be my responsibility.
So I would give you, in a situation where you're dealing with a subordinate, a greater level of responsibility for that effective communication. And I think that would be fair.
Sure.
I think we would all agree that in a work environment, that would be reasonable. Yet when we look at children learning in school, if the teacher communicates something to the child and the child doesn't understand it, why is 100% of the responsibility for that miscommunication placed on the child? That doesn't make sense to me. So what we want to do is start looking at what's going on. What's causing that miscommunication? So if a teacher says something to a child and a child doesn't understand, and the child says, "I'm sorry, I don't understand," if it's just said back the same way, it's not going to help. So what we're going to talk about this evening is different ways of taking information in and how to adjust so that we can communicate to a child or to anybody else in the office, it doesn't matter, in a way that's more in line with how they're processing that information.
Okay.
So that's where we're going to be headed. So I don't believe in attention deficit disorder. We'll talk about that later on. I don't believe in learning disabilities as they're classified today. I believe that there are miscommunications, and I think it's unfair to place 100% of that responsibility on a child.
Beautiful. So no doubt that is controversial.
Well, yeah, so we got the most controversial stuff.
Yeah. And so really just I'm excited to see where we go inside of that.
Yeah, so I guess the next thing we're going to talk about is what makes learning difficult. So the biggest thing is fear. And again, we can look at it if you're given some new responsibilities at work and you're expected to learn something new. If your boss is standing over you yelling at you that you've got to get this, your fear level is going to go up. And if you're afraid, you cannot learn. When I was at Teachers College, one of the things that they taught us was pose, pause, pounce. And I swear they taught us this. So what they said was, you do your lesson, then you pose a question to the class, you pause for a moment, and then you very quickly say a student's name. And that's how you keep their attention. And even as a student, I was saying, this doesn't make any sense. Because now the anxiety level of everybody in the class is going to go up because they're afraid that they're going to be jumped on and told to answer the question.
Right.
So you can't learn when your anxiety level is that high. And it's the same thing as adults. If you're walking on eggshells, you're not going to be able to learn new information. Yet we expect kids to learn in an environment where there's a lot of fear. And if you find it intimidating when somebody is yelling at you to learn something, imagine what it's like when the person is 3 times your size. Because that's the ratio it is for a child. So now they're afraid and they're not able to take in the information. So that's one of the biggest causes for having difficulty learning. The other thing is around beliefs. We're going to talk a little bit more about beliefs later on. But if you tell a child, for example, I had difficulty in math. Math is really hard. You're never going to learn this. Well, as soon as they take ownership of that, they're going to have a lot of problems in math.
Right.
So we've got to be very mindful of the beliefs that a child has, and adults. You hear it with adults all the time. I used to learn faster, now I can't learn as quick, or I can learn that, I just can't learn this. Well, those are all limiting beliefs that we have to be able to address so that learning can become possible.
Sure.
So these are just some ideas.
Do you have anything just quickly around that? Because I as you said, I always grew up with my dad being good at math. That's when he was a student, and I was good at math. So I just thought, that was always in that space.
Right.
And that was a positive belief, right? Like a positive reinforcing belief. Right. But it was still just a belief.
Right. But if you believe that, then it's going to make math easier.
Yeah. And so I guess my question is around awareness. And so how do we become more aware of our limiting beliefs? Because we're not naturally programmed to think about them.
Okay, so let's talk about that. We can
Yeah.
talk about that as far as a learning environment goes,
Sure.
which is, I think that's the next slide.
Okay.
So if we look at a learning environment, look at when a child was learning to walk and talk. If a child takes their first step, what's going to happen when a child takes their first step?
They're gonna just collapse
They're
back
going to fall
over.
over. So if a parent goes running over and says, "Oh, you poor thing, it's so difficult to walk, don't even bother trying, and I'll give you a big hug." Of course, you're not going to do that. So you're, oh, look, he took the first step. Oh, that's fantastic. Everybody's positive, everybody's encouraging. Yet they make a mistake on a test and they go, oh yeah, that's really hard. I remember when I was in school, and they start bringing up all these limiting ideas that they had when they were in school, and now they're accentuating them and giving them to a child. And what's a child know? A child is going to accept it as truth. So I think we've got to be very mindful of the environment that we create for the kids when it comes to, especially if they're learning something new. I was listening to something on the radio the other day, and they're talking about the new math. Well, I don't know what the new math is. Like, addition and multiplication is the same as it was when I was in school. It's the same it is now. So they're talking about how difficult the new math is. That's their limiting ideas. They might be doing more at a younger age, but it's still math. So I think that if we stop looking at the negative side of some of these ideas and start encouraging the kids in a positive way, just like we did when they were learning to walk and talk. If you have a child that makes a mistake when they say their first few words and you make fun of them and point at them, they're not going to say anything. Well, why would they want to talk in a math class if you make fun of them and point at them because they made a mistake with their multiplication tables?
Sure.
So we have to be very mindful of that. The other thing we want to do is we want to be mindful about how we're reinforcing what the child is doing. So let me give you an example.
And I was going to say, slow down talking a bit because you're going super.
really?
I can tell you're super excited.
Okay.
And I only say that because when as it goes through the audio, it can be jumbled when it's fast.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, but it's no problem. It's beautiful.
Okay, I'll do my best to
Yeah.
slow down. So let me give you an example. Child comes home and says, I got 95% on my math test. And the parent says, 95%? That's great, but what happened to the other 5? So now you've got the child focused on the wrong side of the equation. Rather than getting excited for what they've accomplished, now they're getting upset for what they didn't accomplish. And unfortunately for a child like that, they learn that if they get their grades down to someplace in the 70s maybe, nobody makes wisecracks. So now you've got a child that's capable of getting 90s, but because people are making smart aleck comments, they bring their grades down. So we have to be very mindful of how we're going about encouraging the kids because they take everything we say as gospel. So if a child comes home and says 95% and we get really excited, the likelihood of them achieving 95% in the future just went up. But if we make fun of them for not getting 100, the likelihood of them getting another 95 just went down. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So and likewise, we want to be mindful of how we're encouraging the kids. So if a child comes home and says, "Mom, Dad, I failed my math test," and the parent says, "Well, why did you fail?" So think about the answers that question is going to give in this child's head. So they're going to, first off, there's no right answer for that. So if you say, "Why did you fail?" you're going to make up a whole bunch of negative answers. Well, I'm not good in school. Teacher doesn't like me. I can't do math. I'm not like the other kids. It's a whole list of negative answers. Whereas if we say exact same scenario, child comes home and says, "Mom, Dad, I failed my math test." And the parent says, "You know what, there's nothing I can do. At this moment, nothing that I say will change that score."
Right, yeah, exactly. That's what's so now.
But what I say could affect the next one.
Yeah.
So I know that if I say, "Why did you fail?" I'm gonna direct that child's mind in a negative direction, and they're gonna beat themselves up. So I got to change the question. So what do you have to do to get a B on the next test?
Is that the flip of the question?
That's the flip of the question. So then we're going to say, so what do you have to do to get a B? So in all likelihood, imagine that you're the child. In all likelihood, if I were to ask you, what do you have to do to get a B on the next test? The answer is going to be, I don't know. The challenge is that the child does know. They're just afraid to say because somebody jumped all over them last time they answered a question in class.
Right.
So all we have to say is pretend you know. And as soon as we say to a child, pretend you know, we take away all their risk for being wrong. Because now they can't be wrong, they're just pretending. And if we say pretend you know, so what do you have to do to get a B on a test, on the next test? I don't know. Well, pretend you know. Well, okay, I gotta
Study
study, I
more.
gotta listen to
Yeah.
class, I gotta pay attention, sit in the front of the room, ask questions. There you go. You just got your recipe for success. And it came from the child. Then you can reinforce that, get really excited. Wow, this is fantastic. What can I do can help? And now you've got a plan in order to move forward. So now the child's leaving the conversation feeling empowered as opposed to feeling beat up.
Right.
So we've got to be very mindful how we're communicating with a child. If you're at the office and somebody's learning something new and they make a mistake, you're not going to start screaming at them and humiliating them in front of their peers. So if it's inappropriate in an office setting, how can it possibly be appropriate in a classroom setting?
Right.
Right? You have a human rights violation in an office. In a classroom, it's considered appropriate. That doesn't make sense to me.
No.
So we want to be very mindful of the environment that we're creating for the kids, and more importantly, the questions that we're asking them, because the questions we ask will direct their mind in a specific direction.
So out of curiosity in that space too, because I know we have parents watching this and teachers maybe too, but maybe this is outside the scope of this, but how do you set up a kid powerfully that if they happen to be in a classroom with a teacher that's being that way or it's landing that way for the child, how can you create that so the child feels confident to actually speak up or
Okay,
what
so,
is, yeah.
So let's look at it in the context of your office. If you're getting bullied in your office by some manager, what are we going to do? We're going to say, well, you've got to learn to set boundaries. So that you say that's not appropriate to talk to me that way. If you want to get a solution, we'll work on a solution together. So you're going to set, as an adult, you're going to set boundaries. Well, the child's not capable of setting boundaries in the classroom. And if the teacher has overstepped the boundaries by saying something derogatory to a child, then the parent has to step in and say, there's boundaries.
So really it's the parent when the child come home listening for what the child went through in their day and try to listen for that type of activity happening in the classroom.
Right. So if the child says, I don't know, the teacher was yelling at me, well, you want to try and get a better understanding of what this was all about, and ideally deal with it when it's small. I think that right now we seem to be at a time in the cycle where there's a lot of beat up teachers. People pick that profession because they really truly love teaching kids. Sometimes they get frustrated just like anybody else would get, and we just have to remind them there are boundaries. And if a child feels that they're being picked on for whatever reason, we've got to make sure that the teacher knows this is a sensitive child for whatever reason, and we have to choose a different way to communicate with that child.
Cool.
So it's a boundaries issue whether you're an adult or whether you're a child.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about how people learn. I'm not sure where we are in this.
Well, we have learn through the senses.
Okay, yeah. So the way we take information into our mind is through our senses. So we either see it, we hear it, we taste it, we smell it, or we feel it. That's the only way we can get it in. So assuming that all those are working, then there's no learning disability. So what happens is we take this information in, and then it goes through a filter.
Okay.
And the filter is going to say, I can't learn that, or I can learn that. Or the filter is going to say, this is going to be difficult, or this is going to be easy. Or the filter is going to say, I'm not smart, or whatever. There's going to be a filter. Now, I think we need to understand that those filters were placed there either by parents or teachers or environment or what's going on around the child. The child didn't create those filters themselves. So if I tell you that in order to keep your job, you have to learn whatever, and your anxiety goes way up, it's because of the filters that you have inside. So those filters are saying, well, gee, look at how busy I am. I don't know if I can do that. That's going to take a big time commitment. I haven't been doing school for this. And all these filters are going to influence how you perceive that. So we have to be mindful with, especially with kids, is that pre-programming that we're giving them. So we'll go back to the math example. If I tell you that, math is really hard, you just have to get through it. Well, how are you going to perceive every math exercise from that moment forward once you take ownership of that belief? So what we want to understand is people take information in through their senses, and then that information goes through a filter.
Right.
Our job as parents and teachers is to help make sure those filters are all positive.
Yes, and I was just thinking of a different example too, given Halloween's just around the corner. I remember being a little kid and at school, stick your hands through the like the hole, and then you put your hand in, and it's like something is in there. And I just remember the one, it might have been grapes. I can't remember. It was supposed to be eyeballs, right? And you're feeling eyeballs,
Right.
and everyone, everyone's thinking it's gross, but that's being created by the whole
Right.
environment of it being gross. It's just putting your hands in grapes and water,
Right.
was all it was. Um, and I remember it felt funny or whatever. It didn't feel gross, but I remember saying, "Ooh, gross," but it was because everyone else was saying it was gross.
Right.
But it wasn't actually gross to me. But now I was being like created of being gross,
Right.
even though that actually isn't how I was naturally experiencing it.
So you were told in advance how you would experience something.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, why don't
That's
we
complex, by the way.
It is complex. Yes.
Yeah.
So but why do we require the
Yes.
same approach when it comes to learning something new, whether you're an adult or a child? It doesn't matter. So if I tell you that this learning is going to be gross, the likelihood of you experiencing gross is high.
Yeah.
If I tell you this is going to be manageable, and I say that there's going to be little pockets in this, there's going to be a little bit more challenging, but we'll get through it.
Right.
Now all of a sudden, when a little challenge comes, you're going to say, "Oh, this is what he was talking about."
Sure.
Now this is going to be more manageable to get through. So we can set kids up, or employees, or staff members, or whatever, friends, family, doesn't matter. We can set them up with a determined expectation that, oh, this is going to be manageable.
Right.
And as long as they believe that, that becomes a filter. So then whatever comes at them, they're going to go, okay, this is just a little glitch, but it's manageable.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the way we've told them in advance how they're going to perceive the situation.
And so even if I was to consider a different scenario in that, so thinking of this age we now have with everything being digital. So I'm just going to use a simple example of the math homework, right? On one side, or the video games, TV, all the things that are distracting on this other side, texting friends, I don't know, whatever's there, right? And depending on the age of the child, that may be coming into the future, that may be right now, it depends. But how do you actually go about making studying for math, let's say, in this case, like more exciting than all these other things, or more fun, or however you want to put context around that?
Well, I think you can make it a game. Math is a lot of fun, actually, if you make it a game, because there's a lot of things you can do with numbers. So it depends on how you present it. If you say, you know what, this is going to be boring, you're going to have to memorize this, and there's no other way, it's going to be hard. But if you say, wait a second, let's go through this and have some fun with it, and all of a sudden it just changes the expectation. So you can start off with simple multiplication, get really excited, and as soon as you start getting excited, the student's going to get excited, and once the student gets excited, then it makes it easier to take that next step.
Sure.
So we want to be mindful that the next step is a reasonable step. So if I take somebody who's learning their multiplication tables, and the next step is derivatives, they don't even know where to begin. But if the next step is division or long multiplication, or you know what I mean, like it's a smaller step, then they can get excited about that. They can feel a success. They can feel some pride in what they're accomplishing, and it makes it easier to move forward. So that's where we're going.
Cool. And then I'd say for parents, be confident that you can do that math.
Sure.
Well, if you're going to sit and do it, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
it just helps when that confidence is there too.
Well, and keep in mind that if a child, usually we can figure out the math up until whatever, grade 5 or grade 6, when they start doing algebra. That's really when parents start to panic. But all you have to do is go to YouTube and look up whatever. So solving for one unknown tutorial, or solving for slope tutorial, and there'll be 100 different instructions broken down to 3 or 4 minutes that'll explain it to you. So you can go through it, and then you can go and explain it to the child. You can watch it together with the child, because the child's used to learning that way. They spend a lot of time on the computer.
Right.
So getting back to what we were talking about taking information in. So we take the information into our senses. Now, in the context of learning, especially traditional school learning, most of the information that we learn visually, auditory, or kinesthetically. So there's 3 dominant ways. Now, everybody is all 3. One tends to be more prevalent in certain situations. So what we want to do is we want to understand which style of learning the child is utilizing at that moment, and then teach to that style. So for example, if we look at a visual child, they're going to, or an adult, it doesn't matter, they're going to tell you that they're visual. They're going to use visual words. I see what you're saying. Okay, that's great. They're telling you it's visual.
Yeah, yeah.
So you know that they're processing in a visual way. So if I say to that child, does that feel right to you? They're going to go, well, I don't feel anything. I can see it, but I don't see anything. I don't feel anything. So we want to be mindful of the way that they're actually processing. So if they're visual, they'll tell you, I see what you're saying. That's a bright idea. They're going to use words that are more visually based. Now the interesting thing about somebody whose dominant learning style is visual is they have pictures going through their head. So what happens is they can often take a discussion to a reasonable conclusion faster than somebody can speak. And because they're visual, they're looking around. So if you're in a classroom and you see somebody looking around, you're not going to say they're visual. You're going to say, oh, he's got ADD.
Right, he's not paying attention.
He's not paying attention.
Right, yeah.
So now this child just got labeled, and all it is he's processing visually. So one of the things you want to be mindful of is somebody's visual, where they are in a classroom. So for example, where we're sitting right now, there's a glass wall behind us. So if somebody's watching us and they're very visual, every time somebody walks by, they're going to lose focus on us. Because they're going to look up. So when a visual child is in the classroom, you want them closer to the front so they can see the teacher. You want them away from the door so that if somebody walks by in the hall, they're not distracted. You want them away from the window so if somebody walks by outside, they're not distracted. If a car goes by, they're not distracted. Now the key about a visual learner is once they get a picture, they're fine. So that what they need to do is they need to get in the habit of putting up their hand and asking for an example to illustrate the point. Because what they're saying is, if they say, excuse me, ma'am, I have a question. I just want you to, if you could please do an example to illustrate that point. What are they saying? Especially with the words that they're using, they're saying, I need your help to get a picture in my head. Because once I get a picture in my head, I'm fine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, because I'm a visual learner,
right?
So that makes total sense.
Well, and watch this.
My language. Yeah.
So on the screen right now, so there's the two of us on the screen. But if I do this, as soon as I'm out of frame, anybody who's watching this who's visual, they can't hear me because they can't see me. So now they're probably looking at the side of the screen,
trying to find you. I'm even doing that. Yeah.
So one way I illustrate this, if there's a group in front of me, is I'll ask people once we identify what they are, the visuals, to put up their hand, and all I have to do is sit behind somebody or behind a pole or something, and the visuals go crazy because they can't hear if they can't see. So, in an office environment, if you've got visual people in the audience and you use a PowerPoint, if you go stand in the back of the room while you're doing the PowerPoint, visual person goes crazy. Do they look at the slide? Do they look at you? They don't know what to do. Their stress level goes up and they can't learn anything.
Right.
So if that's the way it works in an office environment, the same way in an elementary school or high school classroom. So somebody who's visual, and understand that there's lots of research, there's lots of conflicting research. There's more kids coming up now that are being visual than anything else because they've been exposed to visual stimuli since they were very young.
Right.
So when they're in a classroom, they're generally going to talk quicker. They're going to use visual words. I see what you're saying. I get the picture.
Right.
So they're going to tell you that they're visual, and then they need examples to illustrate the point. Once they get that picture, they're fine.
Cool.
Makes sense? Any questions about that?
No, that's great.
Okay. I don't know if anybody else has.
I keep looking over, and if anybody has questions, this is this is great stuff to ask questions around. So if you have any, feel free to ask them, and we'll keep going.
Sure. How long do we have? What time do we go till?
Another 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes.
10, 15, okay. So next we look at auditory. So somebody who's an auditory learner, they learn by sound. So what happens is the teacher will present the lesson and they can take it in. They generally will tell you that they're auditory by using auditory words. Oh, that sounds right to me. That rings a bell. They're telling you that they're auditory. So what we want to be able to do is make sure that we explain things in an auditory way to them. And that's simply by having a conversation. As long as their fears and anxiety is down, they'll be able to take in the information.
Right.
So the third one is kinesthetic. And
so just on that one too, like, because I think I'm just thinking of different examples in my head of people that I know that are like this, right? And I know my wife, she could be watching something, but not be in the room. And sometimes I try to do that, and I'm like, oh, this is pointless. I don't know what's going on.
Right.
Meanwhile,
Because you can't see it.
yeah. Meanwhile, she can see a whole TV series or something like that without actually seeing the TV series.
Right.
And
Right.
and it blows my mind.
Well, maybe we'll use you and your wife as an example in a moment.
Yeah, for sure.
So the next of the three is kinesthetic. So they learn by doing, they learn by feeling. There's more challenges for kids that are kinesthetic than any other group because they need to be actively involved in learning. If the teacher goes through a lesson, they don't get it until they actually do it.
Sure.
So that's why you can have a child who's failing geometry, and you take them out of geometry and you throw them in a shop class and they build a cabinet. It's the same skill set. It's just one they're forced to sit there and listen, and the other they're allowed to actually do it. And somebody who's kinesthetic will tell you that they're kinesthetic. They'll say, I don't follow you. That doesn't feel right to me. I'm not grasping it. They're telling you that they need to do it. So now we'll use you and your wife as an example.
Sure.
So because it's the same thing. It's all communication, right? So you're visual and she's auditory. So let's assume, just for the sake of an extreme example, that there's a misunderstanding between the two of you, get into an argument. And she gets upset and she says, you don't love me. And you're going to go, of course I love you. Like, look, I bought you flowers. But you never say it.
Right.
I don't have to say it. I always do in those things.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
You see the difference?
Yeah, yeah.
So she's saying, I need to hear it because I'm auditory.
Right.
And you're saying, I need to show it because I'm visual.
Right.
See the difference?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So now you need to communicate to her the way she's feeling it, the way she's experiencing that communication. So if you go and buy her flowers, she's, oh, that's nice. But you've got to make sure that she hears what you're feeling.
Yeah, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. It's super clear. Yeah.
Same thing in a learning environment.
Right.
If a student is visual and the teacher goes through and explains things in a lecture format, they won't get it until they get that example. Right. They need the example to illustrate the point so they can get that picture in their head. Right. So somebody who's visual will quite often be diagnosed as having ADD because they're distracted. They're looking at all the stuff going on around them because they're visual. Well, why not acknowledge that and remove some of those distractions from the environment? I think it's the next slide actually has a diagram. So what we want to do is we want to understand that you actually turn on different parts of your brain based on how you move your eyes. So when you look up, you're turning on the visual part of your brain. When you look to your ears, you're turning on the sounds, and when you look to your heart, you're turning on feelings. You're going internal.
Wow.
So if you ask a child, well, actually, I'll give you an example. If you ask an adult a challenging question, and they look down, the chances of that adult having been diagnosed as having a learning disability as a child is very high because the answer's not down there. But they're self-conscious. So what do they do when they're self-conscious is they look down because they're getting in touch with their feelings. Now, here's the challenge. If you ask a child something and they do this, with the best of intentions, a parent or a teacher will say, hey, the answer's not up there.
Right.
Look at me.
Right.
Well, the answer is up there because what they're doing is they're using their eyes to turn on the visual part of their memory in order to recall the information. So if I ask you, what color shirt did you have on Tuesday? So you have to look
I'm so clear of how I look up to the right all the time, even in this conversation.
No, you left-handed?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing, just so we know. So the diagram on the screen has you looking up to the left. So my right, the person who's looking, their left. And that holds for like 95% of the population. Left-handed people are just reversed.
Okay.
So they're going to look to their right. That's why you're saying you're very aware of looking to the right.
Right.
So that's why I asked about being left-handed.
So I'm visual recalling.
So you're visually recalling. So if, for example,
sorry, I'm pointing at the screen. Yeah. I'm pointing at the slide.
Yeah. So you're visually recalling when you look to the right, whereas 95% of the population would look to their left.
I see. Okay.
Because it's usually a left-handed person that will look to the right. So you've got to test this before you start drawing any conclusions.
Sure.
Bottom line is people will look up to turn on pictures. So we want to be mindful of allowing a child or anybody we're talking to the opportunity to look up or look to the side in order to gather their thoughts. But if I ask you a question that, whatever, is a deep personal question, and, we're on camera, so you're uncomfortable, you're going to look down.
Right.
Because you're going to go inside and you're going to go, oh, no, I'm really uncomfortable. Should I answer this? What should I do? Perfect natural reaction. So as the communicator, I know that I just did something that made you feel uncomfortable. So now I have to change the way I'm communicating. So if you can imagine a child in whatever class, teacher asks a question, child looks up at the answer. Teacher says, hey, the answer's not up there, look at me, literally turning off the child's brain. And now the child is self-conscious because they can't get the information. So what do they do when they're self-conscious?
So they go all the way up to write down?
To look down, because they're self-conscious. And now their anxiety level is going up.
Wow.
So watch what happens. If you see somebody who is upset and they're crying, their eyes are down. If you say stop that crying, they're going to look up in order to take themselves away from the emotions and be able to get pictures of something else that's not going to upset them. And then they can stop crying. So we see this in practical applications. Now in a classroom, how do we use this? So in a classroom, we can take somebody who's struggling and assuming that they're traditionally organized, which is what the diagram is, we're going to move them to the left-hand side relative to the teacher. Because now, when the teacher's doing the lesson on the board, their eyes are naturally looking up to their left. So it makes it easier for them to take in the information. Now, because you're left-handed, I would put you on.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, so, you start looking for left-handed kids, right-handed kids.
Right. So what you're going to do is, I don't want to generalize too much by saying left and right, but you're going to watch them and you're going to ask them a question. You're going to see where their eyes move to find the answer. And watch what happens if I ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, and you're going to look down. So then all I have to do is allow you the opportunity to look up. If I encourage you to look up, you will find the answer because now you're turning on the pictures.
Okay. So you want me to look down when you ask me a question?
So if I ask you, I don't know, what's the equation for a straight line? I don't know if you remember that.
No.
But you see what I mean? So imagine, we've talked about this. You should know that.
Yeah.
Come on.
Keep going down. I have no idea. Yeah.
So if I say, it's something that we covered last week, and I get your anxiety level down, and I get you to look up. As soon as you look up, now you can start seeing the equation, and you just read it. It's there.
Yeah, it's there. You start piecing together something.
And the interesting thing is that if you see, so the equation of a straight line is y equals mx plus b.
Right.
Okay, so look up and see y equals mx plus b.
Yeah.
Once you see it, you can say it from left to right, y equals mx plus b, or you can say it from right to left. So if I ask you the equation of a straight line, but say it from right to left, what is it? So you have to look up.
B plus X.
So you're looking down.
B plus Y, B plus X, M equals Y.
There you go. But see, when you look towards me, you lost it. The only way you could get it is you had to look back up because it's a picture.
Wow.
So when we're teaching these kids and you start yelling at them, come on, you should know this, they're going to do this. They can't get the answer because they're looking down.
Right.
So we want to.
I guess too. I'm just thinking here too. It's just like in reality too. A kid doing a test, they're naturally looking down, studying in a test. And what they could actually also be doing and encouraged to do would be, reading that question and taking a second to look up.
Right. And what happens in a classroom? They keep your eyes on your own paper.
Keep your eyes on your own paper.
Right.
Really damaging the mark. Or a parent comes into the room and sees the kid looking up. Like, hey, you're not focused on your homework. What's going on? But
now we understand.
They're actually it's beautiful. Thinking. It's great.
So what we want.
And just so I get clear too, what's the left and the right? Like I get that it's recall and create around auditory. Sorry, the mid level.
Okay, so when you're looking at your ears, what you're doing is you're turning on sounds. So you're remembering a conversation. So I'll give you an example. Somebody who's auditory, we have to be mindful for them whose voice the recording is in their head. So for example, if the recording is in the teacher's voice, they might not be able to turn it on during a test. And if you've ever talked to somebody who's auditory, ask them about tests, and they'll say, every once in a while, I'll get all confused during a test, and then I'll put my hand up and the teacher will come over, and as soon as I hear her voice or his voice, it all comes back because they just gave you the tone to turn on that audio recording in your head. Wow. So in this particular diagram, we've got recall on one side and we've got create on the other. And I don't want to get into that too much because we're going to run out of time. But basically, if somebody's telling the truth, they're going to look up to recall. They're remembering it. And if they're making it up, they're going to look up the other way because they're creating it.
Interesting.
So if I ask you, what did you do last weekend, and I want, make up an outrageous lie,
I went skydiving, right?
if you're gonna look,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're
I'm
gonna look
looking
it
up
up,
that way, yeah.
right? Because you've never gone skydiving.
Right.
So
Right.
you got to create that.
Sure.
So we want to be mindful of that.
Interesting.
I want to make another couple of points if I.
Yeah,
is-
of
is
course.
okay.
Yeah, let's keep going here and aim for about five minutes more.
Okay. So one of the things that is a challenge when it comes to learning is subconscious emotional associations. So everybody has them. You and I have them. The people that are listening have them. Kids have them. So we create these associations, and then it puts us into a particular emotional state. So, for example, the smell of turkey makes you feel that it's festive time of year.
Warm and family and
Right.
whatever.
So it creates that experience creates a feeling. So what happens with kids is they've got these emotional associations. So imagine a family sitting around the dinner table. There's lots of activity, lots of talking. Everybody's sharing what they went on with their day. Everybody's eating. They finish the meal. They clean off the table, and they tell the child to sit at the table and do their homework. The child has an emotional association with the table that the table's for talking and eating, not homework.
Right.
So then the parent gets frustrated because the child is going to start talking, and they go, stop talking, do your homework. But that's the association the child has. But I'm hungry. You can't be hungry, you just ate. Do your homework. Because they've got that association. And rather than understanding the association, they get upset with the child. And now the child doesn't get anything done. So we need a special area that's the study area. So the child, and you can do this in the kitchen, you just get a small desk in the corner or whatever, as long as it's not the table that you just had your meal at and all the activity. So now you can create a positive association. This is the learning table. So when you're working at this table, this is where you learn, this is where you concentrate.
Cool.
And now we're creating association there. Same thing with, if a child gets punished by being sent to their room, and then you say, okay, time for homework, get up to your room. They're gonna right away get anxious because they feel like they're being punished.
Right.
Because we've created, unintentionally, we've created that association. So we have to be very mindful of the emotional associations that we're creating for the kids, because they're going to trigger those emotions when we put them in that environment. So we want a special area that's just a study area.
Right.
If you look at your desk at work, that's where you do the work. You don't sit there. If you get in the habit of sitting with your feet up on the desk and chatting with friends on the phone, then when you go to work, the first thought that's going to mind is, who do I have to talk to?
Right.
Who can I call? Rather than what work do I have to do? Because you've got that subconscious association.
Sure.
Same.
And just in sharing that too, and we won't go any deeper into it, but even just using your phone in bed now,
Right.
and creating that as like, oh, I review, I have to watch stuff in bed, or I text people in bed or whatever.
Right. So you've created
And
an
now-
emotional association with texting in bed as opposed to sleeping in bed.
Yeah.
So the problem is that if you wake up in the middle of the night, because of this emotional association, you got to check your phone before you go back to sleep.
Yeah.
Well, that's not helpful. We want to have an emotional association that when you go to bed, you go to sleep.
Right.
So-
kids, and we think, because it's under the context of kids, they're now not getting enough sleep, and it just creates a cycle.
Right. And this has happened in adults where somebody gets angry and they're arguing with their spouse, and the subconscious association now becomes that anger with the spouse's face. And you've seen this. Just get out of my sight. I can't deal with you right now. I need some time. Well, they don't understand what's going on. What really happened was there was an unintentional subconscious association that was created.
Wow.
So we know how powerful this is. So we just want to be mindful when it comes to the kids.
Okay, let's keep on hustling here. Personal motivators.
So we want to talk about it, and again, if I tell you I want you to do something at work, if there's no motivation to do it, it's going to get done absolutely last, and you're going to try and figure out every possible way to get out of it. Well, kids are no different. So what we want to ask, and I can ask you, I can ask the child, what's most important to you in your life right now? So if I ask you that question 3 times, what's most important to you in your life right now, I know exactly how you're going to make decisions. So if I ask you what's most important to you in your life right now, and you say,
I can say my family.
Okay, and after your family, what's most important?
My workplace here.
Okay, and after your family and your workplace, what's most important?
Making a difference in the world.
Okay, so based on those, if I tell you that I got a really good deal on a gym membership and I want you to come and work out with me, It's
Yeah.
not going to happen.
I'm like, no.
Right, because it's not on
I was
your
so
list
not
of
enrolled in that. Yeah.
right. Yeah, see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not there. But if I say that, I was talking to your wife and I was talking to a family member, and the whole group of us is going to go work out together, and we'd like you to join us because your family's going to be there. Now it's totally different.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So what we have to do is we have to figure out what's most important to a child. We can just ask them, and sometimes it takes a little digging in order to get to truthful answers because they don't understand. They think we're messing with them. But once we figure out what's most important to them, as long as we can show them a link between what they're learning and what's most important, learning becomes easy. Like, how can a child struggle in math but is passionate about baseball know all the baseball stats and how to calculate them?
Right.
How can somebody who's passionate about hockey struggle in math when they know all the plus and minus for every single person on the favorite team? Because they see the relevance to them. So if I tell you to do something at work, unless you see the relevance for you, it's not going to happen.
Right.
And in your example, if I keep asking you to stay late, at a certain point you're going to say, I can't. It's interfering with my family.
Right.
So we have to be respectful of what your personal priorities are. And it's the same thing with the child. So we want to make sure that we take the time to ask a child what's important to them. What's important to them about learning? What do they want to experience in a learning context? So once we understand that, we want to make sure that we're respecting that when it comes to learning and show them some relevance, show them some connection between what they're learning and what's most important to them. And then learning becomes more manageable.
Beautiful.
There was one last point that I wanted to make.
You talked about the beliefs in learning before.
Right. So I just wanted to give an example, just as a belief, and I think I wrote this one out as an example. Okay, so just out of curiosity, how many times do you have to have something explained to you before you're confident that you know it? First time that comes to mind.
Yeah. So
if I'm explaining something brand new,
yeah.
How many times do I have to explain it to you before you're confident that you really know it?
Like, let's say 5 times.
Okay, so it's a subjective number.
Yeah.
So if you ask somebody who's really, really good in school, they're going to say 1.
Right.
Somebody who's really, really bad or struggling might say 100.
Right.
Yeah,
totally.
So if somebody says a really big number, the way that came up is somebody got angry at them and they I can't believe you don't understand this. How many times do I have to go through it? 100? And he goes, well, I guess you're the adult.
Yeah, right.
So if it's a real extreme number, we've got to work on getting that number down because otherwise it's going to be a problem. But we'll use the number 5 as an example. In order for you to understand something new, you're going to have it exposed to you 5 times because that's your subjective number. Now, I could work on getting that down to 3 or 2, but what I want you to do is I want you to listen to me say it. I might write it on the board, so now you're seeing it a second time. I want you to read what I just wrote on the board. I want you to say it out loud twice. And now you've got it because we've respected that filter, that belief that you have that it takes 5 times to learn something new.
So yeah, even though it's subjective in a belief, respecting it
is key
because then it creates the actual learning.
Right. Now, if they say something that's really like a big number, then our focus is to get it down to a reasonable number. Ideally, 5 or less would be manageable. But if a child feels for whatever reason that they need to have something explained to them 5 times and the teacher only explains it once, they don't get it.
Yeah,
so they got to go for extra help. And they go, I think I got it. And they go again. I think I'm getting a little bit. And until they get to 5, they don't get it. Because in their head, they're saying, until I get it 5 times, I'm not going to understand this.
Wow.
So we want to respect that. So I think that's a really good question that people can ask their kids or somebody at work. It doesn't matter. We're all still learning. It's lifelong learning. How many times do I have to go through something before you feel confident that you know it? You'd be amazed some of the numbers. Yeah. Everybody's going to come up with a different
number.
number.
Question down.
Yeah, there you go. But it's an interesting one. You can go home and ask your wife tonight.
Yeah.
And she's going to say, well, I never really thought about it. Well, just pretend, pick a number.
Yeah.
So they'll pick a number and watch somebody who's gone far in school and done very well. They're more likely to say a very small number because they've got confidence in that area. So our job is to get that number down, eliminate some of these limiting beliefs, respect how the child is motivated in order to learn, understand that they learn in 3 specific ways, visually, auditory, and kinesthetically, and then create an environment that's positive so it makes it as manageable as possible for them to learn the new information and avoid pigeonholing them at all cost.
Right. Thank you so much. I was even inside that when you asked me this question, just to jump up to it quickly, and I was about to give you this whole big spiel trying to explain what answer I was going to give you, and then you just said pretend,
Right.
and then I was just like 5,
And that gets
and I
back.
was like, so I just want to give that as something like that, the simplicity of creating that safety
Right.
versus me having to give the right answer, whatever that would
Go
be.
into a kindergarten class or grade 1 or 2 class and ask a question, and every hand goes up. Everybody wants to participate.
Yeah.
So what happens between grade kindergarten and grade 3 or grade 4, where they get self-conscious? All it took was some comment when they answer. See, there's not necessarily any benefit to answering a question correctly, but there's huge consequences to answering it incorrectly.
Right.
So they learn it's not worth the risk. So now they're afraid to answer a question. Once they're afraid, we have to get over that fear. And the easiest way is pretend you know. So if I say, what number, as far as how many times I have to go through something before you understand it, pick a number. And you go, I don't know, well, pretend you know. All I'm going to say is pretend you know. And you'd be amazed. You would be amazed the answers that people come up with. And you can do that with anything.
Well, yeah, I just got diffused when you said it, right? I was like, oh, boom, here's an answer.
Right. Because your
Yeah.
stress level comes down.
Right.
And it's the same with ask a child to go through their spelling words. Whatever the word happens to be. How do you spell this word? I don't know. Well, pretend you know. Okay, now it's safe. So now they're going to do it, and then you've got the choice. There's only 2 possibilities. They're going to spell it correctly, so they're going to spell it incorrectly. If they spell it correctly, you make a huge fuss, just like you did when they were learning to walk and talk. They feel good about themselves. They have a sense of pride. Then you go on to the next word. Or if they spell it incorrectly, talk to them about how close they were, help them to recognize it, have them say it out loud again, so they understand it, respect the number that they picked for how many times you have to go through something, help them to feel good about getting it right, and then go on to the next question.
Wow. Thank you
My pleasure.
so much for your time today. That is Rory's contact information. So feel free to email him following this with any follow-up questions you have.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
see Amy was typing something, so we can wait just oh, yes, thank you. Thank you to Amy, and thank you to everybody who's been on with us today. Have yourselves a lovely evening, and we'd love to know how this time works as well, and what other times you think would work better for parents for other types of webinars like this in the future. So I see Stephanie typing something, and I just want to make sure we don't miss out on whatever that is before I close it.
How do you tell that they're typing?
Oh, I could see it pop up there for a second. See it's a little highlighted.
Oh, yes.
So let's see here. I don't know if it's going to be anything. As soon as I click end, it's over.
Ah, the power.
Okay. Thanks, Jane, and thank you, Stephanie. You guys have a fantastic evening. Take care, and thank you again.
Thank you.